Hey guys, I'm Luke Huckaba. I'm an architect here on the Managed Virtualization team at Rackspace. Today we're going to talk about part 3 of my architecting a DR solution with SRM. Part 3 is deployment, actually getting to build this stuff out. This is my favorite part. I love this part. First off, let's talk about our management VMs. Previously I talked about maybe if you wanted to stack everything up or spread it out. I decided to go ahead and build everything out laterally. We're going to go with the vCenter server appliance. We're going to go with the Windows server for SRM and VUM. We're going to go with vSwap, which is actually 2 VMs. We need our database server and a vCenter replication server. So we have 6 total servers that are going to get built out for this thing. If you do the math for all the requirements, it's in the neighborhood of about 14 cores, 68 gigs of RAM, and just less than a terabyte of storage. So in order to build this stuff out, we have to have ample hardware. And so we're going to go ahead and, I kind of threw a curveball on this one. I said we're going to go ahead and use vSAN, which vSAN requires 3 nodes. That's kind of like building a RAID 5 array on 3 disks. You don't want to do that. We're going to go with 4 machines on this one. And we're going to go with dual octal core, like 256 gigs of RAM. Each one's going to have 2 SSDs, and we can do 14 spinning disks. Depending on the hardware platform you use, I chose to go with one that has that many drive slots in it. We're also going to go with the internal SD card to install ESXi on this. That saves the number of spindles that we have available for vSAN. We're also going to go with 4 10 gig NICs and 2 1 gig NICs. The reason why I say 4 is so you can use 2 for vSAN, 2 for your VM traffic, and then you can have 2 for management and anything else that you may want, like maybe redundant management uplinks. That's really up to you on that one. Okay, so now we're going to talk about step 3, which is the install. The install is probably the longest and hardest part. You want to start off with building your database servers. While those are building, you can go ahead and deploy the vCenter server appliance, and you want to go ahead and build both sites in parallel. That way you kind of save on time. So while those 2 vCenter server appliances are deploying and your database server is being built out, you can also build out your Windows server for VUM and SRM. Once that database server is online, go ahead and set up your users and databases, everything you need, but make sure when you set up the user account for the SRM database server, or the database connection, you want to make sure the password does not have a bang or exclamation point at the end, and it does not have a double quote inside of it. For whatever reason, that breaks the installer. Also, whenever you go to install SRM and it asks you, do you want to install vCenter replication, you say yes. When you're installing SRM, make sure you have it in a directory that doesn't have any spaces in it. The default is fine, but if you say, well, we'll move it to the D drive, but same actual folder structure, it can't handle the spaces. I think when it links to like a Perl directory, it fails. Also, when you're installing the SRM one, it requires a 64-bit DSN, which is common in a 64-bit OS. It works fine. For VUM, on the other hand, it requires a 32-bit DSN, so you have to launch the ODBC from the 32-bit realm of things. Then, once you have everything online, go ahead and deploy your vSphere replication servers at both sides. Make sure they can connect to one another. Log into SRM and make sure your sites are paired. Pair everything up nicely. That way you're good to go there. Configure that connection. Once that's done, go into your resource mappings. At the Getting Started page within SRM, it'll show you the order of kind of operations that you need to go. It's easiest if you look at like your folder mappings. So you'd map data center to data center, and then if you had folders like specific tiers or specific apps, map those one to one. Your resource mappings would be next, where you want to set those to be like cluster level. So cluster to cluster, you could do resource pool to resource pool, host to host, but make sure you do one to one, because if you say if you have several of your clusters fell into one cluster on the other side, it's difficult to fail back. If you only have one cluster on the other side but multiple at the source side, break them up into resource pools. That way they can fail in, and then you have that one-to-one mapping coming back the other direction. Next would be your networking. You want to make sure all your networkings are set up, or your network mappings are set one-to-one as well. When you fell from one, you want to have that one exact one to come back, because you don't want it to fall into a different port group or anything like that. Then you want to make sure you set up your placeholder data store. Placeholder data store can be really small. It can be like 1.3 gigs. I think that's the minimum that vCenter allows right now. It contains a bunch of files, essentially empty VMs that are just a few kilobytes in size, so you could have 1,000 VMs in there and you're still not going to reach that 1 gig. Within SRM, it doesn't mention this, but you also want to separate out your vSwap. Every VM that you power on has a vSwap file equivalent to the size of RAM of that VM. You don't want to replicate that data. It's useless data. It's just going to add overhead to your replication. You really don't want to do that. what I recommend you do is create a Vswap data store and configure it at the cluster level to allow the host to govern where those Vswap files live. Then go to every host and point it to that Vswap data store. If you have VMs that are online already, you have to power them off, power them back on to get them to use that data store. Well, I don't really have a golden rule for what size. What we do here at Rackspace is we double the amount of physical RAM in the cluster and set the data store to that size. That allows you to do 2-to-1 on your RAM over provisioning, and you should be fine there. If you want to go greater, it's up to you. But if you think about our cluster here, we have 1 terabyte of RAM, and so you would need 2 terabytes of Vswap storage. So that's really up to you if you want to go that route or not. Now let's look at the SRM build and test. We got everything set up. We have our resource mappings. Let's actually build out SRM. So say we're going to have 3 tiers of applications. When you set up these tiers, you're going to want to create protection groups for every single tier. So you're going to have 3 protection groups, like say tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. In protection group 1 for those VMs, you're going to want to set those boot priorities to priority 1, and then 2 to 2, 3 to 3. The reason why you have to do it in the actual protection group is because it's an attribute of the VM, and no matter where that VM actually lives in that protection group or recovery plans or whatever, it will always have that boot priority that you set in the protection group. Now, we're going to want to go ahead and set up 4 recovery plans. The reason why I say 4 is because you're going to want to have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and then a fail everything. That fail everything, since you set your boot priorities on the other ones, when you hit that one, your priority 1s will come on first, your tier 2s will come on second, and then tier 3, which is priority 3, will come on last. And that's really the best way to do it. Once you have that online, hit your test button. Make sure it works. Hopefully, if you followed everything and did it right, everything works and you have nothing to worry about. There have been some occasions that I've ran into here where a VLAN might be missing or something, but this test helps you figure that out. Stick around for part 4 where I talk about actually maintaining this stuff, and don't forget to follow me on Twitter @TapHuck. See you guys later.